Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to tackle a huge idea, one that many of us take for granted, that allies are friends. We're going to dig into a really powerful analysis that argues this very belief, which sounds so harmless, might actually be dangerously naive.
Okay, let's just start with this quote because it really sets the stage. What this is getting at is that the whole allies are friends idea isn't just a simple mix-up. Nope, it's a comforting story, almost like a fairy tale, that we tell ourselves because it feels nice and civilized. But in reality, it could leave a nation completely vulnerable.
So, the source we're looking at, it kicks things off by going right after what it calls a moral bedtime story. You know the one. The idea that nations in an alliance, say NATO or the EU, are basically a big group of buddies who've got each other's backs. It's a really comforting thought for sure, but the argument we're about to explore just completely dismantles it.
And here's where it gets really sharp. This friendly view of alliances is called maladaptive. Now that's a term straight from biology, and it means a trait that actually hurts survival more than it helps. In the tough, cold world of geopolitics, assuming your ally is kind and has your best interest at heart, well, it's a bit like a rabbit deciding to trust the wolf just because they live next door.
And it doesn't stop there, because the argument is that the biggest threat you face might not come from the enemy you're watching, it comes from the ones you've already let inside your walls, the ones you trust without question, without constantly checking.
Think about it, right? It's a really simple but powerful idea. With your enemies, you're always on alert. You expect them to make a move, so you're vigilant, you build defenses, you watch everything they do. But with your allies, we tend to relax, we let our guard down, and that exact moment of complacency, that's the opening a really smart competitor is always looking for.
This chart right here just lays it all out, crystal clear. Friendship is built on real affection. It assumes loyalty. An alliance? According to this view, it's based purely on what's useful for each party. It assumes everyone is seeking their own advantage. It's not about intimacy, it's about coordination. We get them confused, but an alliance isn't a marriage. It's more like a temporary business deal.
Okay, so if allies aren't friends, then what are they? Well, this is where the whole argument shifts to a much colder, you might even say more scientific way of looking at how countries really deal with each other.
The idea here is that everything, and I mean everything, from big companies to entire nations, is shaped by a constant pressure to compete. Nothing that lasts does so by accident. It survived because it outcompeted its rivals for resources, for influence, for power. So in this view, competition isn't something that happens now and then. It's the default setting for the entire world.
And this is absolutely key. This constant competition is rarely a straightforward fight. It's usually hidden, camouflaged in the very polite language of diplomacy and business. So when a country starts pushing a certain ethical framework for AI or a best practice for handling data, it isn't just a nice idea. It's a competitive move to set the rules of the game to benefit them.
All right, so let's make this real. How does this kind of hidden competition actually look in practice? The article gives us two really clear modern examples of how this plays out between so-called allies. First up, the European Union. Now, the argument isn't that the EU competes with tanks and planes. No, it competes with something called legitimacy capture. Basically, it tries to export its way of doing things, its rules, its regulations, its standards, to the rest of the world, including its allies. And that's the genius of it, right? By setting the global rules for huge things like AI ethics or data privacy, you gain control. If your standards become the world standards, you're the one in charge. You've essentially outmaneuvered your competition without firing a single shot, and it all looks like neutral, ethical progress.
Okay, for our second example, let's switch from the world of ideas and rules to something you can actually touch. We're talking about the physical building blocks of all our modern technology and the hard reality of the supply chain.
This is just a perfect illustration. To make the most advanced computer chips, you need a specific machine, and only one company in the world, in the Netherlands, makes it. This creates what the article calls a choke point. It's not a partnership, it's a leash. The ally who controls that one single company can basically hold the technological future of every other nation in their hands.
So all of this leads to a pretty stark conclusion. If the world really is this arena of constant competition, even among allies, what's a nation supposed to do to stay independent and not just become someone else's follower?
I mean, it doesn't get much more blunt than that. The big takeaway from this whole framework is that if you get sentimental, if you get emotional about your alliances, you are setting yourself up to be controlled.
Trusting an ally to have your best interests at heart is, in this worldview, the absolute fastest way to give up your freedom.
So in a world like this, what actually earns you respect? Well, it's not friendship, it's strength. The only way to be treated as an equal is to act like a respected competitor. That means demonstrating real power, setting clear boundaries, showing you have capability, and making it known there are consequences for crossing those lines.
So in the end, an alliance isn't real power. It's a tool, sure, but a dangerous one. This perspective calls it dependency with paperwork. True power, true sovereignty, has to come from within. An alliance should always be seen as a temporary arrangement that a strong nation is always working to grow beyond.
And that's the really provocative question we're left with. It forces all of us to look at the words we use, at the comforting stories we tell ourselves, and ask if they really match up with how power actually works in the world. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.